Oxford United were your everyday Football League club in the early 80s. A fanciful cup run or two, as many promotions as relegations, and some crippling debt to boot. And then Robert Maxwell came along. This is how he changed the club forever. First they were renamed into what we know them as today, Oxford United, and then they received admission into the Football League. The 1960s started as non-league Headington United and ended as Oxford United in the second tier with a FA Cup quarter-final under their belt. The sky seemed the limit. Stable enough in the second division, it quickly became apparent that the 70s was a period of stagnation, then regression, as Oxford started the 80s staring into the abyss of financial turmoil and a return to the 4th division. And if you want to cheat death, get yourself a man who had done it before. His name was Ian Greaves, a fullback for Manchester United who was supposed to be on a plane in February 1958, but an injured elbow prevented his travel for a fateful European Cup quarter-final. Greaves had been out of work for a year and he received an Oxford side on Christmas Eve 1980 who couldn't buy a win at home and was sat in the 3rd division relegation zone. It was a stereotypical in-tray for a new manager, solidify the team, and with that he got some stereotypical results. Gone was getting pumped every week by rabble like Colchester, Carlisle and Chesterfield. Here was a more binary outlook on life, as Oxford dared to score more than once in only 5 of their remaining 21 fixtures. Losing only 3 times in the league, the U's would end the campaign undefeated in 13, albeit with 9 of those games being drawn. They had become the archetypal hard nuts to crack as they rested in the comfort of 14th place that summer. But as alluded to at the top, Oxford's finances were on their arse. In the summer of 81, Greaves was forced into stripping back his playing staff budget. The crisis stopped just about short of players driving themselves to away matches, but did impact the quality of the team coach and pre-match meals. Nonetheless, they made a bright enough start to the league season despite its renovation of 3 points for a win. Oxford even abandoned their fears of playing part-timers in the Cup when they dispatched of Dover, their first win over non-league fodder for 15 years, as they eventually bowed out in the 5th round to top-tier Coventry City, as Everton performed similar duties in dispatching the U's from the League Cup. On the surface, it was great news as Oxford pushed for a promotion spot. Beyond that surface, they were bleeding £3 a week and had gone over their overdraft limit. And who says football clubs aren't relatable? They were given 2 weeks to live. Desperate, the club went cap in hand to a publishing magnate by the name of Robert Maxwell. He would underwrite the club's debts, give them half the chance of survival before weeks later going all in. In what was a little sampler, or what Maxwell would probably call hors d'oeuvres, of what the new owner would bring to the club, Brighton refused him helicopter access onto the Goldstone Grounds playing surface ahead of a cup tie in January, so he sulked off back home. Oxford would defeat the 1st division opponents by a margin not seen from a lower league club since Scunthorpe dished out a 6-2 battering against Blackpool in 1961. Greaves called it probably the greatest day in my career. 7 days later, he was gone. That footage should give you some idea as to why Oxford's season was a bit stop-start in the winter of 81. With the schedules ravaged, the Manor Ground wouldn't see action between a 3-goal triumph over Preston on November 28th, right up to February the 3rd, where Reading were the victims. In the meantime, Robert Maxwell had wielded his axe. After the life he'd had and was having, football was nothing more than a plaything, that much would become obvious. Born Jan, a Jew in 20th century Europe, holding a Czech passport, he'd escape persecution, amass a small fortune, stand as an MP in Britain, before making a name for himself as a man who would revitalise bankrupt companies. Legitimately or not would be revealed, but not before his claws had been sunk into Oxford United. He'd set the club the goal of gaining promotion by the end of the following season, and himself a goal of getting the local council on side to build a new stadium. One One wouldn't be achieved, the other only would happen 10 years after his death. Anyway, back to Ian Greaves. Him and Maxwell quite obviously mixed about as well as oil and custard, so Greaves applied for and got the Wolves job within days of Maxwell arriving. Cut to Valentine's Day. Former Oxford player Ron Atkinson and Birmingham City boss Jim Smith went out for a meal with their respective wives, I should add, and probably no car key swapping went on, but I can't confirm that bit. The wheels were already in motion for Jim Smith's dismissal from St Andrews because Ron Saunders' sudden availability after his resignation from the Villa. It had been resolved at that meal that Smith should take on the Oxford job. They were considerably in better nick now anyway. Whilst they sat 9th in Div 3, they had 3 games in hand on Chesterfield and only 8 points to make up, i.e. promotion was still in their hands. At least it was, until an indifferent March saw 1 win from 7 fixtures and the club's top scorer Keith Cassells, as well as a young prospect Mark Wright, were sold to Southampton in exchange for $150k and Trevor Hebbard. Entering April, they were 3 points closer to promotion, but they'd run out of games in hand. A near perfect month had them ensconced in the top 3, only for it to be ruined by some scroats called Swindon, who controversially won 3-2 at the county ground. Swindon were fighting for their 3rd division lives, just a shame that their fans' smoke bombs effectively swung the balance of the game, and therefore promotion, as Oxford lost their final 4 fixtures to finish 5th. Meanwhile, Swindon went down anyway. Cassells had been replaced that summer with the signings of Gary Barnett, Mick Vinter and Steve Biggins. Then the season began.
Well to get in the cross. What a header too! He had no way through, and then a beautiful ball to Barnett. Could be a chance here, it's in! Cut one more!
From the 4 wins to start the season to a full-scale riot at home to Portsmouth and 4s and 5s stuck beyond Walsall and Orient, Jim Smith's side were in the shake-up for promotion once again. They made signings galore: George Lawrence from Southampton, John Butcher from Blackburn and Neil Watmore from Birmingham, but results continued to be inconsistent, thanks largely to a fractured cheekbone dished out to Trevor Hebbard in the middle of the campaign. They bounced from a 5-1 demolition of Bradford City to shipping 3s against Exeter, Sheffield United and Newport within a month, and that last defeat was the death knell for the U's, as they would have to be content with another 5th place. And yet the finances were now in order, thanks to a healthy dose of redundancies and a tighter knit squad of just 17 players, only for a summer distraction thanks to Robert Maxwell's continued interest in Reading, which manifested itself in this: a batshit sane idea.
Millionaire publisher Robert Maxwell unveiled detailed plans today about the proposed merger of Oxford and Reading football clubs. But the scheme's attracted more criticism, and one opponent has taken out a court order to try to stop it.
They'd be called Thames Valley Royals. Fortunately, Maxwell wouldn't get the board support over at Reading that he was promised, but in the first snowflake that would become a 21st century avalanche, he was allowed to maintain a financial interest on both clubs. His later purchasing of Derby County only snowballed this as the 80s wore on. Smith added further names: Crystal Palace's Paul Hinshelwood and free agent Bobby McDonald. Instantly, it was obvious that this season would be better.
Again, the instigator, Brock on the left here, and as he goes through, Neil Watmore, back from injury, is very thankful to put the ball in the net and Oxford in front. Vinter saw Kevin Brock moving in behind him, and he hit his shot with such force that David Harvey in the Leeds goal never even moved.
When Oxford won a free kick and Brock buried it in Bailey's net with a lovely ball.
Biggins! And it's there!
Oh, and McDonald! 1-0 to Oxford!
The league form wasn't too bad either, dropping only 4 points from their first 9 league fixtures as they shouldered the responsibility of both a deep League Cup run and a promotion push, commanding an 8-point advantage over 4th place by Boxing Day. It was only natural that the elimination of names like Newcastle and Leeds, as well as 3 high-profile games against Manchester United, as well as an upcoming replay at Goodison Park, offered a distraction from league competition. It had been totally taking the town by storm.
31,000, easily the best of the season, braved a snowstorm to see Everton open the scoring after 7 minutes. Oxford's amazing run of cup success began to look doomed when the trusty left foot of Kevin Sheedy made it 2-0 after 33 minutes. Forced this replay, and Heath made it 4 goals in 5 games when he got number 3 early in the second half. Their most emphatic win of the season. As first, Paul Hinshelwood 4-1 back for Oxford, scorer, and Everton now play Aston Villa in the semi-final.
Once that pipe dream and another in the FA Cup 3 weeks later was put to bed, they'd lose only one of their remaining 19 fixtures to storm to the title. Colin Todd had been signed for just 12 matches, but his experience was invaluable in getting the U's over the line. Finally, after 19 cup games and 46 league outings, Oxford could put their feet up, safe in the knowledge they were second tier again. And yet the summer was spent with Maxwell throwing his considerable weight around in the public eye, threatening to pull funding if the proposed new stadium wasn't built. Like most of his musings, it was an empty threat, as names had continued to pour into the Manor Ground over the 83-84 campaign, Newport's John Aldridge being the headline name, whilst Chelsea's Peter Rhodes-Brown followed. But of course, it wouldn't be the summer without a piece of Robert Maxwell sensationalism. This time he went for the very top, launching a £10 million bid for Manchester United with the plan to pass little old Oxford on to one of his sons. It of course wouldn't transpire when United chief Martin Edwards raised the price last minute to £15 million and would ultimately not sell the club until 2005 when it was gifted to the Glazers. Lesser of two evils, we'll never know. Distraction wasn't too far around the corner as Maxwell attempted to sink some more money into Derby County before making his daughter the first female director in English football. And if you think I'm making a graphic to represent her to go in this video, you gotta be ill. Oh yeah, and he also bought the Daily Mirror, which would become handy in getting his point across. Let's get back to the football. Oxford further prepared for life in Div 2 by acquiring Dave Langan and Billy Hamilton as the bookies slapped a 10-1 price on United for promotion. It'd prove a bargain.
He gave Oxford the lead in 6 minutes.
3 of their 4 goals came in a 5-minute spell just after half-time. Billy Hamilton hit the first from 10 yards.
Full-back David Langan made the opening, and Aldridge finished it off in superb style.
Pulled the crossbar, and before Tim Flowers could compose himself, Gary Briggs was there with the header.
6 minutes gone when Brian Cox fumbled a shot from John Turek, and Bobby McDonald scored in his 5th goal of the season.
And did 1-2 with Trevor Hebbard to beat offside, and Oxford were ahead.
They burst into life in a new division, only going down to defeat when they had to travel to Main Road at the beginning of October. The fact that they simply moved back into gear, slapping 5 beyond Sheffield United, Leeds, Charlton and Crystal Palace by the end of the year was proof enough that Oxford belonged. John Aldridge was smashing in the goals, Kevin Brock was troubling England's selection, and in both Dave Langan and Billy Hamilton, 2 bona fide Irish internationals. Whilst Hamilton's knee ligament injury would test Oxford's depth, they'd managed just fine, helped along by the acquisition of QPR's Jeremy Charles, nephew of John and son of Mel. Oxford had been imperious on their own patch, dropping just 7 points from 21 fixtures whilst maintaining a capable enough record of 7 wins and 7 defeats away from home. It all merged into a 10-point advantage over the chasing pack for a promotion, ultimately confirmed in spite of a loss at Elland Road on April the 27th. Oh yeah, and they also had time to do this in the League Cup.
Hamilton. Lawrence takes over, a good-looking ball. Hamilton there. Now it's Aldridge. It's gone in. And then a good overlap. Hamilton came to meet it. Brilliant goal. Shaw Langan on the right. Oh, it's gone in.
Whilst this League Cup campaign would sit equidistant between 2 far more memorable tilts at the trophy, Arsenal went to bed on Halloween '94, thoroughly spooked by their defeat. Oxford would go on to be rather uncharacteristically eliminated from both cups under the radar to Ipswich and Blackburn, as opposed to the glamorous defeats they had recently been subjected to. Nonetheless, Oxford had earned the right to call themselves one of the better teams in the country and would have a chance to prove that fact in the following season.
But it's the moves at Robert Maxwell's Oxford that have caused more of a stir. Jim Smith, who's managed them from the 3rd to the 1st divisions in 2 seasons, today joined Queen's Park Rangers. Maurice Evans, who joined Oxford from managing Reading, becomes caretaker manager.
But Jim Smith wouldn't, at least not at the Manor Ground, after a difference of opinion on his wage packet festered in the summer of '85, combined with an impending TV blackout and Maxwell's acquisition of Brian Dalton to be Oxford's managing director. Smith decided it was time to go. The owner had been holding out off just $3,000 as Jim Smith got his desired $50k a year elsewhere at QPR. Desperately scrabbling around for a successor, Maxwell offered the job to Maurice Evans. He said no, but he'd be leading them into the new season as caretaker anyway. Hardly the finest preparation for a first ever season in top flight English football.
Growth Brown. Hammered! Yes! Switch the hold on. Langham again with the cross. It's there! It's the fullback Slatter!
And with one cursory glance at the league table after their latest win, Oxford United were quite clearly holding their own in the top flight, despite all the tumult that summer. Just a shame that there wasn't any live or highlighted footage available to the public until the turn of the year. Whilst the circus the club endured during the summer meant only one name in Neil Slatter was acquired for the team, Maxwell had been busy behind the scenes. He'd vetoed a deal for Adidas to manufacture the club's latest kit, going with Umbro instead, before the unfortunate sponsor of Wang Computers would adorn the strip, with $300,000 pouring into the club. It wasn't long before the club were bolstered by the arrival of Ray Horton into the midfield. Beginning with Northampton, Oxford made it a mission to eliminate all the ends, Newcastle and Norwich going down in the autumn, before our League Cup quarter-final draw tossed out a favourable tie against Portsmouth. They say in football that one trophy leads to another, and who was to say that the Daily Express five-a-side tournament trophy won ahead of Arsenal wasn't going to be the catalyst for greater things. Whilst injury had stunted the U's progression out of an FA Cup third-round tie against Spurs, Portsmouth wouldn't be granted the same satisfaction in the League Cup, as Oxford ran in 3 goals to confirm a semi-final against Villa. 2 little games away from Wembley.
Now, Aldridge lurking in the middle. Oh, sweetly done. Oxford have got some big fellas at the back. Burt for the shot. Oh, yes! Evans was up there. Scramble. And has the goal been given? It has. The goal's been given. 2-2.
Evans. Aldridge.
Oxford were Wembley bound in what was quickly becoming their competition. Of course, it had to be only one team and one man waiting for them in the capital. Jim Smith and his QPR would provide the opposition to Oxford's first ever trophy. The cliched dress rehearsal had taken place 3 weeks prior and had drawn out a 6-goal thriller, splitting the sides evenly. The final would never be able to live up to that hype, but it could grant this Oxford United team immortality nonetheless. Oxford United could not rest on their laurels one bit. They were enveloped in a relegation dogfight and hadn't won a league game since just after their semi-final win over Villa. Fate was in their hands thanks to games in hand, but they did occupy the drop zone with 4 matches remaining. Anybody up to Villa in 16th was still looking over their shoulder. A 6-pointer at Portman Road was a great reality check for the U's, but in defeat it became quickly apparent that this would be one of the greatest one-season wonders of all time. They had 3 matches to play, all at home, but the opposition could scarcely have been more difficult. First, the reigning champions Everton on a run of 1 defeat in 26.
Given time to set up Phillips. Oxford United have a goal that could mean First Division survival.
The result had a massive impact on both ends of the table, as it not only kept Oxford within a chance of a survival shout, It derailed the Toffees' title bid. Nottingham Forest were next and a win would seal survival, except this was Forest under Brian Clough, former European champions and in the process of building another great team. The loss was no embarrassment, but Leicester's 2-0 win over Newcastle plunged the U's back into the bottom three. The story was simple, everyone around them had finished their season and Oxford needed to win their final match. The small matter of Arsenal.
A goal up after just 3 minutes. Penalty. Icing on the cake. Billy Hamilton scores number 3 and the celebrations begin.
Oxford had lived to fight another day. It was clear it had been taking a lot out of the club in adjusting to a huge league with a change of manager, but the highlights were there to see. Outside the League Cup triumph, there were wins at Stamford Bridge and Maine Road as some of the best of the country had to offer in Everton and Arsenal had been beaten. That summer came the solidifying news that Maurice Evans was finally taking Maxwell up on his offer 10 months after he had offered it. Alternatively, things were made less clear by Liverpool's selling of Ian Rush to Juventus. I only bring this up because they wanted to replace him with his ringer, Oxford's John Aldridge. Thankfully, Italy's 2 foreigner rule meant that Rush wouldn't be immediately signed by the Turin club. Surviving the top flight was made harder in the 86-87 season by the introduction of the playoffs. This would initially place the 4th worst Division 1 team against the highest 3 outfits from Division 2 not already promoted automatically.
14 league goals would make him the championship scorer.
Regis was there and it's Regis!
Defensively, it was obvious that Oxford hadn't improved to the requisite standard, but they were still capable of providing enough quality to succeed, as teams like Manchester United in Alex Ferguson's managerial debut, Nottingham Forest and Sheffield Wednesday found out upon their visits to the Manor. And whilst visits to Villa Park and Upton Park were also highlights, 4 points gained against Charlton Athletic left Oxford with the chance to seal their survival a match day earlier than the prior season at Luton. Effectively, John Aldridge's goal-scoring prowess has coaxed enough form out of the club before he departed for Liverpool in January for £750,000. It left the club on rocky foundations ahead of the 87-88 campaign as Liverpool swept to one of their all-time great seasons, Aldridge banging in 29 goals. Meanwhile, Dean Saunders took up the Aldridge mantle at the Manor ground as Robert Maxwell's attention continued to be taken up by matters at the baseball ground and Derby when he resigned from the Oxford board in '87. Whilst the league campaign was an unmitigated disaster, prompting Oxford's relegation, as Mark Lawrenson replaced Maurice Evans in the campaign's later months, they did come within a whisker of Wembley once again.
Steen coming in. Oh, brilliant goal. Brian Steen. With the left foot. It was. Oh, it's in.
We're currently on a tour of Britain through football. Go follow where we've been and maybe even a cheeky subscribe after. What a wanker I am.